In this series, I will show you how to introduce some blues-infused spice into your guitar solos by adding one extra note into the minor pentatonic scale, known as the blue note. This will create what's referred to as the blues scale. When talking about the blue note, we are typically referring to the flat 5 interval in the scale. To find this, it's useful to know the intervals that are used to form a minor pentatonic scale. These are the root, or 1, followed by the flat 3rd, or minor 3rd, 4th, 5th, and the flat 7th, or minor 7th. So if we simply take the 5th interval in the minor pentatonic scale and lower or flatten it by 1 fret, we can find the flat 5 interval, otherwise known as the blue note. Adding this note to the minor pentatonic scale gives us the blues scale, or more specifically, the minor blues scale. This, however, is not the only place that the blue note, or flat 5 interval, exists within the first position of the minor pentatonic scale. We could also find this same interval here, giving you the complete first position of the minor blues scale. Adding the blues note to these two locations within the minor pentatonic scale offers many more options for new licks or phrases. But before I show you some of these, it's important to understand how to approach the blue note or the flat 5 interval within the scale. The flat 5 interval, otherwise known as the devil's tritone, when played against the root note, in this case G, creates a lot of dissonance and generally doesn't sound great. So it's important to know that when improvising using this interval, it's generally good practice to avoid approaching this new note as a target note that you might purposefully sit on for any length of time. Instead, treat this as a passing tone used to decorate the surrounding notes within the minor pentatonic scale. Alternatively, you could use this also as a stepping stone to get from one note in the scale to another. It's also important to note that although this is referred to as the blues scale, it isn't limited to only being used over blues music. You should view this as a minor pentatonic scale with one added spicy note, and therefore anytime you use the minor pentatonic scale, you can also introduce the blues scale. Here's a few examples of licks you could play that incorporate the blues note within the minor pentatonic scale. You don't need to copy these licks exactly, but more take inspiration from them so that you can incorporate the blues note into your own playing style. So all the licks I'm going to show you will be in the key of G, so that means we're going to start from the G note on the low E string. So we're in the key of G and we're going to be using the G blues scale. For the first lick, we're going to start on the 3rd note in the scale. Then we're going to hammer on and pull off quickly from the blues note back to the 1st finger, before playing the 2nd note and then the 1st note in the scale. So all together. Now the way I like to play this is by leaving the hammer on and the pull off to the very last moment, like this. As opposed to playing them all evenly, like this. If you struggle with getting this particular feel, then one thing you can do is play a typical shuffle feel on the root note, followed by the lick. And the way you could count that is 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. And of course you don't need to play the lick exactly like this, you can play it however you like. This is just one way I like to use this note within the scale. So here's an example of this over a backing track. So for lick number 2, let's draw our attention more to the 2nd blues note that falls within the scale. So that's this one. I'll play the phrase first and then we can break it down. We're going to start this lick with our 1st finger on the 3rd fret of the B string, followed by a 3rd finger on the 5th fret of the G string. Once you hit this note, slide up into the blues note and then back down again. So far. From here, make sure you pull off to the first finger on the G string. So all the notes, the slides and the pull off that are happening on the G string, make sure you only pick once for all of this. After this, play your third finger on the 5th fret of the D string, which is our root note, and then roll over to the G string 5th fret. Followed by our first finger on the 3rd fret of the G string, and our third finger on the 5th fret back to the root note. Now when I play that up to speed, there's a few details I'm adding. One of those being that I'm applying the feel from lick number 1 to the slide to the blues note and back in lick number 2. So see if you can hear that. So instead of, I'm going. The other thing that I'm adding is on the G string 3rd fret, I'm slightly pulling this sharp, which is quite a common thing to do within the minor pentatonic scale, and especially blues. This is not bending to any note in particular. I'm not trying to bend to the next note. I'm doing what's known as a quarter tone bend. You could also call this a blues curl. It just adds a bit of style to this one note, as opposed to, if you struggle with the slide up and down, you could also do hammer-ons, if you find that easier. Feel free to add variations to both the notes and the rhythm. Just take the general idea of this lick and use it for your own playing. Here's an example of this over a backing track. Lick 3 requires you to play the root note on the high E string, so the G note, at the same time as playing a lick with the remaining fingers. This is made easier if you can bar the top 3 strings. Here's an example. To play lick 3, start by barring the top 3 strings, and then we're going to play 3rd finger on the 5th fret of the G string and slide up into the blues note, at the same time as playing our root note. Then we're going to come back to the 3rd finger on the 5th fret and pick both those notes again. So this is this one and this one. And then we're going to play, which is the 1st finger on the G string, and also the high E root note. So we're going to play this 2 times. And then we're going to do a pull off from the 3rd finger to our bar on the G at the same time as playing our root note. So, and then we're going to play the root note twice on the D string 5th fret. If you struggle with the stretch from the slide using the 3rd finger up to the blues note, then you can swap this finger for your little finger. Let's hear that one over a backing track.